The village of Naira rose each morning with the sun, its thatched roofs golden in the light, and its red clay paths warm beneath bare feet. The scent of roasted maize and morning dew wove through the air like a lullaby slowly waking. Children ran past wooden fences, women carried water jars atop their heads, and men sharpened blades for harvest. But within a crooked house at the edge of the village, just past the dry acacia tree and the cracked stone mortar, a girl named Ash swept the ashes from a dying fire, her skin smudged with soot, her hands dry and cracked from labor. Ash was not born into silence. Her name once carried melody, it was whispered with affection by her mother, who braided her hair in the courtyard while humming lullabies to the rhythm of pounding yam. But death, with its cold hands and bitter hunger, came too soon. Ash's mother fell ill one harmattan season, and her father, unable to bear the ache of her absence, brought another woman into the home. That woman came with 2 daughters and a heart that had no room for anything not born of her womb. From the moment the new wife entered the household, Ash's world dimmed. Her father, once the strength of her sky, became a ghost in his own house, cowed by the sharp tongue of his new wife and the endless demands of her daughters, Kinu and Zala. They called Ash names: Smoke Girl, Dust Back, Daughter of the Dead. They laughed when she walked past in her threadbare wrapper, whispered about her behind cupped hands, and smeared palm oil on her chores just to see her scrub them again. Her stepmother, with her sharp eyes and sharper words, stripped Ash of everything: her beads, her comb, her sleeping mat, even the small carved flute her mother had left behind. Each day began before dawn. Ash would rise with the roosters, drawing water from the well before the village stirred. She swept the compound, washed the clothes, fetched firewood, and tended the small garden, though the vegetables were not for her. If she finished early, she would be sent to the market with a basket twice her weight, or to the stream to scrub laundry while her stepsisters painted their nails with red earth and practiced their dances for the harvest festival. Ash never complained. She had learned that silence was safer than rebellion, that invisible girls were less likely to be slapped. She had grown into a girl of quiet beauty, not the loud, powdered kind that her stepsisters flaunted, but something gentler. Her skin was the color of rich clay, smooth and deep, though often hidden beneath a film of soot and flour. Her eyes were shaped like almond leaves, wide and dark, always observing, always searching the horizon for something better. Her hair, once thick and carefully braided, now hung in simple plaits, always tied back so it wouldn't get in the way of scrubbing floors or grinding millet. Ash's world had become small, a cycle of servitude, of longing glances at the sky, of whispered memories and secret dreams. But even in her quiet suffering there was a spark. At night, when everyone else slept, Ash would sit by the fire pit, tracing shapes in the ashes and telling stories to the stars. She spoke of her mother, of the songs they used to sing, of the festivals they would watch together from afar. She dreamed of dancing barefoot under moonlight, of laughter without fear, of being seen, truly seen, just once. That year the harvest festival was unlike any other. News had traveled fast through the village. The prince of the southern lands, heir to the royal lineage of the Golden Plains, would be attending the festival in search of a bride. The festival was always a grand affair, with music and dancing, bright fabrics, roasted meats, and lanterns that floated on the river. But this year the stakes were higher. The girl who caught the prince's eye might leave her mud hut behind forever. She might become a queen. From the moment the announcement was made, the village transformed. Mothers began stitching dresses before the sun rose. Daughters practiced dance steps in open courtyards. Tailors worked by candlelight. Henna sellers sold out their jars. Every eligible girl dreamed of the festival as if it were a doorway to a new world, one where soot and ash did not define them. Ash watched all of it from the shadows. At the market, she listened to the girls brag about their fabrics: silk from the eastern traders, gold-threaded wrappers, cowrie belts that jingled when they moved. At home, her stepsisters shrieked and argued over the colors of their dresses, fought over who would get the braided wig, and begged their mother for more bangles. The stepmother only nodded, promising that her daughters would outshine all the others. She made Ash carry the fabrics to the tailor, fetch the dyes, polish the beads. She said nothing to her about the festival, not a single word. One night, Ash sat outside by the cooking stones, turning embers with a stick. The moon was full, bathing the earth in silver light. From inside the house, she could hear laughter, her stepsisters trying on their dresses, the stepmother bragging about how one of them would surely be chosen. Ash held the stick tightly in her hand, her knuckles white. Then she exhaled, soft and slow, and let her breath carry her wishes to the wind. She did not ask for the prince. She did not ask for a crown or jewels or silks. She asked for a dress that didn't belong to someone else. A moment that was hers. A chance, just once, to dance without shame. She asked the stars and the fire and the ashes on her skin. And when the wind rustled the leaves of the acacia tree above her, she imagined it was the voice of her mother, whispering that wishes, even small ones, are still worth breathing into the night. The festival was only 3 nights away. Ash had no dress, no beads and no invitation. But she had not given up. Not yet. 3 days before the harvest festival, the village of Naira was already humming with the fever of preparation. Dust rose in fine golden spirals as children raced across courtyards with streamers, and women's laughter clashed with the rhythmic clapping of mortars pounding yam. Drums sounded from the village square where dancers practiced for hours, limbs moving like the wind through dry leaves. The air smelled of roasted groundnuts, drying herbs and fabric dye boiling in clay pots. The village had never known such anticipation. There were whispers of gold and glory, of destiny dancing just out of reach. It was just past midday when a royal messenger arrived. He came not in silence but with the sound of hoofbeats and trumpets. Dust rose behind his horse like a red veil. His garments shimmered, deep blue with golden embroidery, his wrists thick with bangles stamped with the royal seal. A sword glinted at his hip, but it was his voice that held true power. As he stood in the center of the square and unfurled the scroll bearing the royal insignia, the villagers gathered like bees to honey. By decree of His Highness, Prince Omari of the Southern Sun, he bellowed, this year's harvest festival shall also serve as the choosing ceremony. The prince, having reached his 27th season, shall select his bride from among the young women of this land. All maidens of marriageable age are summoned to the celebration. No family shall be excluded. Every eligible girl must attend. The square burst into cries and gasps. The choosing ceremony. A tale once told in bedtime stories and remembered from generations past. Some clapped in disbelief. Others wept with joy. The prince himself would be among them, not just in presence but in search of a wife. This was no ordinary dance. This was a chance to change one's life, to leave behind cracked walls and empty bowls. For one girl, this festival would be the beginning of everything. Ash had been in the crowd, standing quietly in the back behind a row of children. She had come to the square to deliver cassava to one of the traders. She wasn't supposed to stop. Her stepmother had given her a long list of errands and expected her back before the sun dipped low. But something about the blare of the trumpets had made her feet freeze. She stood there, cassava sack slung over one shoulder, her bare feet dusted red, her hair wrapped in a faded scarf. To the others, she was just a servant girl watching from the shadows. But in her chest, her heart beat wildly. Every eligible girl must attend. Every. The word echoed in her ears. All her life, Ash had watched the festival from behind woven fences, peeking through cracks, listening to music she could not dance to. This was the first time anyone had spoken a rule that did not exclude her. She did not speak, did not smile, but deep inside, a door creaked open. Not wide, just a sliver, enough to let in a single dangerous thought. What if? She made her way home with the cassava dragging heavier than usual. Her eyes were distant, her lips parted slightly as though tasting a future she had never imagined for herself. At the edge of the courtyard, she heard the voices of her stepmother and stepsisters before she saw them. They were giddy with excitement, bouncing around like ants in sugar. The prince? Zala shrieked. He's going to see me and know, just know, that I'm the one. You? Kinu scoffed. With your loud laugh and lopsided hips? Please, he'll look at me first. I have the golden waist beads. You both speak nonsense, their mother snapped. You'll wear matching dresses. When he sees you together, he'll think you're twins. He won't be able to choose, so he'll keep both of you in the palace. 2 queens. Do you understand what that means? No more begging at the market. No more looking at your father's ghost face. We will rule from silk cushions and drink from silver cups. Then she paused. Ash, she barked. Where are the cassava roots? Ash stepped forward, setting the sack down. Her eyes did not meet theirs. Did you hear the announcement? Kinu asked, her voice sticky with mockery. The prince is looking for a wife. You're going too, right? Zala cackled. Of course she is. The prince is probably into girls with soot in their teeth and ash behind their ears. She'll walk into the square and the prince will think she's the firewood girl, Kinu added, not a bride. Their stepmother didn't laugh. She only stared at Ash with eyes that had long ago decided what her worth was. You will not attend the festival, she said coldly. That summons does not apply to beggars. The prince said every girl, not every shadow. You're not going anywhere, But the messenger said, Ash started, her voice barely above a whisper. I do not care what the messenger said. Her stepmother's tone grew sharp. Do you have a dress? Do you have shoes? Do you even have soap? You think you'll walk into the square and the prince will choose you out of pity? You'll only embarrass this family. You will stay here and scrub this house until it shines like ivory. That is your festival. Something inside Ash crumbled, not with a sound but like a dry leaf ground beneath a heel. Still she nodded. It was what was expected. She knew how to swallow pain. But that night, as she swept the courtyard under moonlight, she looked toward the stars again, not to cry but to imagine. The word every lingered in her thoughts, defiant and sweet. Her stepsisters spent the days before the festival in a whirlwind of preparation. They fought over earrings and smeared each other with turmeric paste to brighten their skin. They rehearsed smiles in polished bowls of water and paid the old singer at the edge of town to teach them melodies that would enchant the prince. Every detail was a battle, from how their hair would be braided to who would carry the peacock fan. Their stepmother barked orders, commanding tailors, spice sellers, and even the village soothsayer for charms of attraction. The house buzzed with the chaos of ambition, and through it all, Ash moved like a ghost, silent, present, but invisible. She stitched the hem of their dresses. She ground the henna into paste. She polished their sandals until her fingers bled. They did not thank her. They barely noticed her. But Ash noticed everything, how Zala's dress was just slightly too tight, how Kinu's perfume made her sneeze, how the laughter from the courtyard did not reach their mother's eyes. She stored those observations like stones in her pocket, small but sharp. Quiet truths that might one day be useful. On the morning of the festival, the house was a storm of colors. The stepsisters twirled and pouted, adjusting beads and arguing over necklaces. Their mother beamed, her hands steadying veils and pressing down stray hairs. She herself wore a wrapper of shimmering orange, her head wrap towering like a crown. When it was time to leave, she clapped her hands. Let us go, she said. Do not look back. Let the girl sweep the ashes. That is where she belongs. And then they left, laughing, perfumed, golden. Ash stood in the center of the empty courtyard, surrounded by silence. The door creaked closed behind them. She dropped the broom. She stared at the dust where they had walked. And for the first time in years she let herself cry, not from pain but from the weight of being left behind again. But something inside her, a stubborn ember, whispered that it wasn't over. Not yet. The house was silent after they left, and the silence felt deeper than usual, not the peaceful hush of early morning, but a hollow echo that made the walls seem farther apart, the corners darker, the air heavier. Ash stood in that silence, the broom still leaning where she had dropped it. Her fingers twitched, unsure whether to pick it back up, whether to resume the life she had never chosen. But her feet were already moving, not toward the chores or the ashes, but to the back room, the one with the creaky wooden chest. It was her mother's room once. Long ago. Now it was a storage space used for broken calabashes, worn-out mats, and dusty bundles of forgotten cloth. The villagers no longer spoke of Ash's mother, not because she wasn't loved, but because the woman had been a flame that burned too brightly. She had died during the harmattan season, leaving behind a daughter with quiet eyes and no protection. Her name was never said aloud in the house anymore. Her belongings had been sealed away like secrets, forbidden even in whispers. But Ash had always remembered. The trunk sat under a wooden shelf. It was low and wide, carved with sun symbols and climbing vines. Dust caked its top like a second skin, but the carved details were still visible if one looked closely. Ash had never opened it. She had only sat beside it sometimes when she was younger, placing her small palm on the lid and hoping, foolishly, that some warmth from her mother still lingered inside. She knelt now, her heart thudding in her chest, and lifted the lid. It groaned like a sleeping beast. The scent of dried camphor and rosewood drifted out, soft and old. Inside were wrapped bundles of silk and cotton, carefully folded, untouched for years. Letters sealed in string. Beaded hair ornaments. A small wooden mirror with a crack through its center. Ash reached in slowly, hands trembling, and unwrapped the largest bundle at the bottom. The fabric caught the light like water. It was a dress of deep indigo and bronze, cloth of a weave she had never seen in the market, the texture soft as breath. Embroidery covered the hem and sleeves, dancing vines, birds in flight, and what looked like small silver stars stitched into the bodice. It shimmered faintly even in the dimness. Ash held it up, eyes wide, and the room around her disappeared. She pressed the fabric to her face. It smelled like something lost and sacred. This was the dress her mother had worn to her own harvest festival, the one her grandmother had stitched with her own fingers, the one they said made the moon jealous. And now it was in Ash's arms, untouched, waiting. She stripped off her ragged wrapper, her fingers shaking, and stepped into the dress. It slid over her body like memory. The fit was perfect, as if it had been made for her and only her. The skirt brushed her ankles and the sleeves hugged her arms just right. Her reflection in the cracked mirror was hazy, but she didn't need clarity to see the difference. She didn't look like a girl covered in soot. She didn't look like the servant they spat on. She looked like someone new. Someone possible. Her throat tightened. She removed the dress quickly, folding it with care and hiding it beneath the bamboo mat under her sleeping corner. If her stepmother saw it, she would burn it. And if her stepsisters found it, they would rip it apart just to hear her cry. No one could know. All day Ash cleaned. She washed the cooking pots and swept the courtyard as expected. She fetched water and gathered firewood. But everything felt distant, like watching someone else's arms do the work. Her thoughts were with the dress, its weight, its shimmer, the way it made her feel like her mother was standing beside her again. She thought of the square. Of music under the moon. Of the prince's eyes searching the crowd. Of what it might feel like to be seen. As the sun began to dip, the sky turned golden pink, casting long shadows across the earth. Birds flew low, heading toward trees to roost. Ash moved faster now, hiding the signs of her coming escape. She covered the firewood with a cloth, doused the flames early and left the pots upside down to dry. Her stepmother would not return until long after midnight. The choosing ceremony always ended with feasts, dancing, and blessings from the elders. That was her window. Night approached like a whisper. Ash lit a small oil lamp and crept into the room again. She retrieved the dress and slipped into it slowly this time, savoring every inch. She let her hair fall loose, combed it gently, then twisted the front into a simple braid, securing it with one of the old beads from the trunk. She looked at herself one last time in the mirror. There was no cracked floor, no bruises on her arms. Just a girl lit by golden oil light, her eyes full of storm. Outside, the festival drums were starting, soft, rhythmic thumps that called to her bones. She stepped barefoot into the yard. There were no shoes that matched the dress. And somehow that felt right. The earth beneath her feet grounded her. It reminded her that she was still Ash, but a new Ash, one who dared to dream. She walked through the shadows of trees and huts, keeping close to walls, heart pounding. The village streets were nearly empty, everyone already gathered in the square. Laughter and music floated on the wind. Torchlight flickered in the distance. As she drew nearer, her breath caught, not from fear but from awe. The square was transformed. Silk banners waved from poles. The great fire in the center blazed tall, sending sparks into the star-pricked sky. Girls in every color of cloth danced in spirals, their arms painted with henna, their eyes lined with kohl. Drummers beat rhythms that made the ground throb. Traders offered roasted yams, grilled meat, and sweet milk drinks. And in the highest seat, beneath a carved wooden canopy, sat the prince. He was younger than she imagined. His skin gleamed like oiled bronze, his robes white and gold, his eyes sharp and searching. He wore no crown, only a single feather behind his ear and a sash with the royal emblem. Every time a new girl approached, his gaze flickered to her, kind but unreadable. Ash stood at the edge of the square, half in the shadows. She knew her sisters were in the crowd, maybe already dancing, laughing, trying to catch the prince's eye. But she wasn't there for them. She wasn't there for revenge. She wasn't even sure she was there for the prince. She was there for herself. To be seen. To be more. She took one step forward. Then another. A child tugged at her skirt and stared wide-eyed. "Are you a spirit?" the girl whispered. Ash smiled softly. "No," she said. "Just a girl." When she entered the torchlight, people turned. Heads swiveled. Conversations paused. Even the drums faltered for half a beat. It was not just the dress, though that shimmered like moonlight on water, but the way she moved. The way her eyes held centuries. The way her silence had the weight of thunder. Whispers began to rise. Who is she? Where did she come from? Is that a queen's daughter? The prince leaned forward in his seat, eyes fixed on her. Ash's heart pounded. But she kept walking, her steps slow and steady. She didn't know what would happen next. She didn't know if he would speak or if someone would grab her, or if the world would laugh. But she knew one thing. She had stepped out of the ashes. And into the light. The sun dipped low behind the hills, bleeding orange and purple across the sky. Inside the house, the mood buzzed with feverish excitement. Laughter and the rustle of silks filled the air as Ash's stepsisters flitted from room to room, adjusting their gelly, powdering their faces, and arguing over which earrings looked best. The stepmother barked orders like a general preparing for war, but it was all background noise to Ash, who moved silently in the corners, carrying trays, fetching beads, handing over water like a ghost in her own home. She kept her eyes low, her breathing measured, her excitement hidden. Her mind wasn't in that room, it was in the secret place beneath her mat, where the shimmering dress lay folded like a dream. Soon they would leave and she would become something new. The dress. Her mother's dress. Her one inheritance, her single claim to beauty, to worth, to identity. But fate has sharp ears for hope, and sharper teeth for girls who dare to dream. Just as the youngest stepsister shrieked about a missing sandal, the stepmother swept through the room, eyes searching for someone to blame. Her gaze landed on Ash. "You find the other sandal," she snapped, tossing a wrapper at her. Ash nodded and hurried to the bedroom, pretending to search under the bed, around corners, behind trunks. That's when the stepmother followed her. Her eyes, always hawkish, scanned the room. Something pulled her to the sleeping mat. She paused. "What's under there?" she asked sharply. Ash froze. "Nothing," she said too quickly, her voice barely audible. But it was too late. With the swift precision of suspicion, the stepmother yanked back the mat and saw the corner of the dress peeking out, the soft shimmer of forbidden memory. Her face twisted. She pulled the dress out fully, holding it up by the shoulders. The fabric caught the dying light, glowing with an ethereal beauty that seemed to mock her. "Where did you get this?" she hissed. Ash couldn't speak. Her throat was tight with fear and shame. The stepmother turned the dress in her hands, her eyes narrowing. Recognition flickered there, not just of the fabric but of the woman who once wore it. Her lips curled. "This was hers," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "That foolish woman. I should have burned all her things." Ash stepped forward, voice trembling. "Please, it's just one night. I wasn't going to go with you. I just wanted to see." "You wanted to be seen?" her stepmother spat, stepping closer. "You think anyone wants to look at you? Ashes on your face, mud on your feet, and you think a dress can hide that?" Ash lowered her eyes, tears stinging. "Answer me," the woman shrieked. Ash whispered, "It was my mother's." And something in that quiet defiance lit a fire in the stepmother's eyes. "She was weak just like you. And look what her softness got her, dead, forgotten. You'll end up the same if you keep believing in fantasies." And then, before Ash could react, her stepmother grabbed both sides of the dress and pulled. The sound was worse than a scream, fabric tearing in jagged gasps, the embroidery unraveling like veins split open. She tore the sleeves, shredded the hem, yanked the beaded neckline until the silver threads snapped and scattered like broken stars. "No, please stop," Ash cried, lunging forward, trying to gather the pieces, but the woman shoved her to the ground. "You'll wear rags like the servant you are," the stepmother hissed. "And you'll stay home where you belong." The two stepsisters appeared in the doorway, gawking. She thought she could go. One laughed, eyes wide. "In that dress? Oh, Ash, did you think the prince was blind?" The other cackled. "Look at her face. She's crying like a baby. Maybe she thought the prince liked dirty girls." Their laughter roared as Ash clutched the torn fabric to her chest, trembling, her tears soaking the once beautiful cloth. Her chest burned with humiliation, her cheeks flushed with helplessness. She had dared to dream. And she had been punished. The stepmother stepped over her like she was nothing. "Clean this mess before we return," she said. "And don't let me find you anywhere near the square." With that, they swept out of the house, silk and perfume trailing behind them like poison. The door slammed. Silence. Ash sat on the floor, broken dress in her lap, ashes on her fingers. The world outside was lighting up with celebration. Drums beat like hearts in love. The smell of roasted yams and spiced drinks drifted on the wind. Girls her age were dancing, spinning under the moon, laughing with open faces and hopeful eyes. And she sat alone, wrapped in rags, her dream torn apart like discarded cloth. She didn't scream. She didn't sob loudly. She just stared down at her lap, her tears silent but steady, her face pale under the lamp's glow. She had nothing. Not a dress. Not a chance. Not even her name spoken with kindness. And yet, somewhere in the farthest part of her chest, a small ember still refused to die. The forest welcomed Ash the way only the wild could welcome the wounded, not with words but with silence. Cold earth met her bare feet as she ran, past the gnarled roots and rustling trees, past the boundary where the village lamps no longer reached. The darkness was not frightening to her. It was honest. It did not pretend to care. Her breath came in ragged bursts, tears blurring her vision as she stumbled deeper into the woods. Twigs scraped at her ankles and brambles pulled at the edges of her ragged dress, but she didn't stop. Her legs carried her until her sorrow was spent, until her sobs were no more than gasps in the cold air. And that was when she saw the fire. It crackled quietly in a clearing ahead, a soft, golden glow in the darkness. It didn't rage. It welcomed. Ash stepped closer, cautious but drawn. Around the fire sat a figure, hunched, wrapped in layers of fabric that looked woven from bark and moonlight. An old woman. Her face was creased like dry earth, eyes dark and deep as forgotten wells. She didn't speak. She simply looked up at Ash, her gaze neither warm nor cold, only knowing. Ash froze. The woman lifted one hand slowly and gestured to the opposite side of the fire. Sit. Her limbs heavy with shame and weariness, Ash moved to the spot and lowered herself onto the ground. The heat from the flames licked gently at her skin. Her throat still ached from crying but no more tears came. She sat in silence, unsure what to say, unsure why she'd even stopped here. But the woman asked nothing of her. She only reached into a clay bowl beside her and pulled out a wooden cup, filled it with water and passed it to Ash. Ash took it with trembling hands. The water was cool and tasted of the forest, fresh, alive. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice small. The woman said nothing. They sat that way for some time, just the two of them in the whispering trees. Ash didn't tell her what happened. She didn't need to. Somehow, in the quiet, her pain uncoiled itself and rested beside her. The old woman stared into the fire as if it told her things words never could. Then, slowly, she lifted one bony finger and pointed upward. Ash followed her gaze. The moon was rising, full and glowing silver, wearing clouds like veils. It seemed to shimmer with a strange sadness. The woman spoke. Her voice was like a rustling leaf, soft and ancient. "Gold remembers those the world forgets." Ash looked at her, confused. The woman didn't explain. She reached into a small pouch tied to her hip and pulled out a pinch of what looked like dust, but it shimmered faintly like ground sunlight. Without a word, she tossed it into the fire. The flames responded instantly. They surged upward, not with heat but with color. Golden embers burst from the wood, spinning and rising into the air like stars being born. They hovered around Ash, circling her slowly. She gasped, startled but unafraid. The warmth of them kissed her skin. One landed on her hand and disappeared, not burning but melting like light into her flesh. The woman closed her eyes. The embers began to dance faster. They wove around Ash's limbs, her arms, her feet, her shoulders. The rags she wore shifted, only slightly, not into cloth, not yet, but into possibility. The ashes on her skin sparkled faintly as if waking. Ash felt something in her chest, a thrum, a pulse like the first beat of a drum in the distance. It wasn't magic like in the tales. It was older than magic. It was memory rising. The woman opened her eyes and smiled. It was small but it held something eternal. And Ash, for the first time since childhood, smiled back. Ash sat still, wrapped in the quiet glow of the fire, the embers dancing around her like moths spun from the moon itself. The old woman's words still echoed in her mind, "Gold remembers those the world forgets." They didn't feel like prophecy. They felt like truth carved in time, waiting for someone to believe. Then the air shifted. The trees stilled. The wind held its breath. And the golden embers surrounding Ash began to slow in their orbit, pausing in the air as if listening for something unseen. The fire crackled louder, rising taller, not with heat but with light. It became a tower of shimmering gold, reaching for the stars. Ash looked down at her ruined dress, the torn remnants of her mother's gown still clinging to her frame like faded memories. The cloth began to tremble. First at the edges, then at the seams. A golden thread appeared, revealed, it had always been there, hidden, waiting. The golden thread unraveled from the fire itself, drifting through the air like a ribbon alive with purpose. It weaved its way toward Ash, coiling around her wrist, then her waist, then her shoulders. The moment it touched her, the cloth began to change. Her torn sleeves dissolved into filaments of light, cascading down her arms like waterfalls of silk. The bodice shimmered, reshaping itself with elegant embroidery etched in stardust. Her skirt lengthened, flowing out around her like sunlight poured into fabric, glowing softly in the moonlight. Each thread shimmered with movement, not still, not static, but alive, as if the gown remembered every festival her mother once danced in, and now chose to live again. The ashes on Ash's skin, once a cruel sign of servitude, turned radiant. They sparkled, then melted into golden flecks that merged with her new garment, becoming part of its design, not hidden, not erased, but celebrated. Her pain had not been wiped away. It had been transformed. The ground at her feet shimmered. From the forest floor rose a pair of sandals, delicate but strong, sculpted from warm sunstone and tied with soft leather strands that laced themselves around her ankles. She stood, uncertain, but the shoes held her like the earth finally recognized her weight and welcomed it. Then her hair lifted, not from wind but from within. It curled and shimmered like twilight clouds kissed by dusk. Threads of silver and gold streaked through her dark strands, catching every flicker of firelight and turning it into something divine. She reached up and touched it, startled, but her fingers felt only softness. She didn't feel like a different person. She felt like herself, finally seen. The transformation slowed, then settled as the fire dimmed back into its gentle crackle. Ash turned to the old woman, her heart thudding with wonder, questions crowding her lips. But the woman was no longer there. Only the fire remained. And the wind, returning at last, whispered through the trees. "You have until the last drumbeat." The words didn't come from any mouth. They lingered in the clearing like a memory, like a warning made of wind. Ash stepped forward, searching the shadows for any sign of the woman. A cloak, a footprint, anything, but there was nothing. Only the soft, warm silence of a forest that had just witnessed something sacred. She turned back to the fire, now smaller, its golden flames folding inward as though bowing to her. Her heart swelled with something she couldn't name. Not just hope, though it was there, but power. A quiet power that had always lived inside her, buried beneath years of ash and silence. She didn't know where the gold had come from. She didn't understand the magic. But she knew this: the world had tried to make her invisible, and tonight she would shine. A new sound reached her ears, distant, muffled, like drums rolling from the direction of the village. The festival. She looked down at herself one more time. The gown shimmered with every movement she made, flowing like it had a heartbeat of its own. It didn't feel like a disguise. It felt like home. She turned from the fire and began to walk. And the forest, sensing the shift, moved with her, parting leaves, softening roots, lighting her path with the glow of fireflies. Each step carried her closer to the music, to the lights, to the dance she was never meant to join. But now she would. Because gold remembers. And Ash, the girl once covered in ashes, was cloaked in it. The path from the forest to the village seemed shorter than it ever had before, as though the night itself bent to clear her way. Ash walked without fear. Her golden gown caught the lantern light that lined the dirt roads, throwing fragments of starlight onto the cobbled stones. Every step was a whisper. Every breath felt new. The festival had transformed the village square into a kingdom of light. Garlands of dried flowers and glowing fruit hung from every post. Drums pounded low like a distant heartbeat. Laughter rose like smoke. And in the center of it all, the people twirled and spun in joyful circles, their colors bright but none as luminous as Ash. As she stepped into the crowd, a hush followed. One by one, dancers slowed. Conversation stalled mid-sentence. All eyes turned. Even the fire in the great bonfire seemed to lean toward her, curious. No one recognized her. Not the baker who used to hand her scraps with pity. Not the seamstress who once told her she'd never wear a real dress. Not even her stepmother, dressed in fine crimson silks, one hand wrapped around a wine cup, the other resting smugly on the arm of her eldest daughter, who stared straight at Ash with a furrowed brow and a slight tilt of the head, unable to place her. Her stepsisters watched her too, their faces tightening with envy they didn't know how to explain. They whispered to each other, scowled, then looked away. But Ash didn't falter. She moved through the crowd like the night breeze, graceful and unassuming, though she caught every eye. People parted for her without realizing, drawn aside by some ancient instinct to make space for wonder. Some bowed. Others stared, mouths open, hands frozen in mid-toast. The music shifted, a lilting rhythm both playful and solemn, and Ash stepped into the center of the dance. Her feet moved not with practiced steps, but with a memory in her bones. She spun, dipped, and rose again as if she and the music had known each other in another life. Her dress flowed like liquid fire. Every turn caught the light, wrapping her in sunbursts. Her laughter, unburdened and true, broke through the odd silence like wind through summer trees, soft, warm, impossible to forget. It was then the prince noticed her. He had been sitting beside his advisors, watching the festival with a detached expression, politely sipping honeyed wine. But when Ash stepped into the clearing, he stood. The goblet fell from his hand and shattered at his feet. His eyes never left her. She danced alone, untouched and untouchable, her golden gown catching even the moon's attention. When the final drumbeat of the rhythm fell silent, Ash paused, breathless, in the middle of the circle. Everyone stood still. The music had not stopped, the world had. The prince walked toward her. His cloak was blue as midnight, his crown simple, his gaze unwavering. There was no arrogance in his approach, only awe, like a child who had just stumbled upon a miracle in his own garden. "May I know your name?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Ash looked at him, her face calm and radiant. For a moment she said nothing. Then, with a smile both sad and knowing, she replied, "I am the one the fire remembered." The words settled in the air like a poem written in smoke. The prince blinked. He opened his mouth to speak again, to ask more, to follow the riddle, but then the drums resumed, faster this time, rolling like thunder. Ash turned her face to the night sky. Her heartbeat pulsed in time with the drums. She felt the magic shift inside her like a tide pulling back. The moment was ending. The stranger's whisper returned to her mind, "You have until the last drumbeat." She looked once more at the prince, whose eyes still held her riddle like a puzzle he would never forget, and then she turned and vanished into the crowd before the final beat could fall. The people parted for her again, stunned. And when they turned to speak to one another, to ask, who was she? No one had an answer. Only the fire cracked its approval. And the moon high above watched silently, remembering too. The festival pulsed with life, a living heartbeat of sound and light, but deep within Ash the magic began to wane. Her golden gown, so vibrant and alive just moments before, started to shimmer faintly, like sunlight filtering through morning mist. The threads of liquid gold felt lighter, as if a breath could blow them away. She heard the distant drums grow louder, the last drumbeat was near. It was a warning, a countdown. The stranger's words whispered in her mind again, "You have until the last drumbeat." Panic flickered in her chest, but her feet moved before her thoughts could catch up. She had to leave. Now. Ash turned from the prince's mesmerized gaze and slipped through the crowd, her movements graceful but urgent. Eyes followed her, wide with wonder, with disbelief, but no one reached out. No one stopped her. It was as if the night itself was helping her escape. With every step, her gown dimmed further, the golden threads fading into soft glimmers, then into mere whispers of light. By the time she reached the edge of the square, the radiant glow had become a faint shimmer. She burst through the festival's lantern-lit gates and into the dark woods beyond. The trees welcomed her return, their shadows wrapping around her like a cloak. The golden dress melted away, thread by thread, until only her simple clothes remained. Yet in the quiet of the forest she felt different, transformed, as if the magic hadn't left her entirely. But something lingered still, a single golden anklet, glowing faintly on her ankle. It caught the moonlight and sparkled like a promise. Behind her, the last drumbeat thundered across the village, echoing in the night like a closing door. Back in the festival square, the prince stood frozen, his heart pounding louder than the drums. He looked down and noticed the golden anklet lying where Ash had disappeared, a delicate circle of shimmering light, left like a message. His breath caught. The girl who danced like fire, who vanished like a dream, she was real. And she had left him a sign. He knelt to pick up the anklet, his fingers trembling. "I will find you," he whispered, voice thick with awe and determination. "Whoever you are the one I seek." The crowd buzzed with questions, but the prince's mind was elsewhere, fixed on the girl who had stolen the night, wrapped in gold, and vanished with the last drumbeat. Above, the moon shone brighter, as if it too was keeping watch. The morning after the festival dawned quiet, but the prince's mind was anything but. Clutching the golden anklet tightly in his palm, he felt its gentle warmth, a faint heartbeat that pulsed like a secret calling him onward. The girl who had danced beneath the moonlight was no ordinary maiden, and the prince vowed he would find her, no matter how far he had to travel. He summoned his heralds at once and announced to the kingdom and all neighboring villages that he would marry only the woman who could match the spirit and grace of the mysterious golden stranger. The message spread like wildfire. The prince sought the girl with the firelight in her eyes, the one who had vanished with the last drumbeat, leaving only a glimmer of gold behind. Suitors and hopeful maidens arrived from far and wide, each eager to prove they were the one. They donned their finest gowns, polished their smiles, and approached the prince with hopeful eyes. But none could carry the quiet strength Ash had shown. None could move with the effortless grace or speak with the riddle that had captured the prince's heart. In village after village, the prince held court. The golden anklet was shown to all, a symbol of the mystery he chased. Some girls tried to slip the anklet on their ankle, but it wouldn't fit, not a single one. The prince watched carefully for that spark, that unmistakable glow of spirit, but it never came. The prince grew restless. The faces blurred into a sea of false hopes and hollow promises. Yet, in his heart he refused to give up. The memory of her laughter, the way her eyes had caught the moonlight, and the whisper of her riddle lingered like a melody only he could hear. "Who are you?" he murmured to the empty air each night. "Where did you go?" His quest became more than a search for a bride. It became a search for truth and a chance to reclaim the magic he'd glimpsed, if only for a single night. The golden anklet was a beacon in the dark, and the prince carried it like a torch, lighting his path through forests, across rivers, and into every corner where hope dared to dwell. Whispers followed him, tales of a princess cloaked in gold, who danced with fire and vanished into the night. The villagers told stories of a girl whose spirit no chain could hold, and the prince clung to those stories like a lifeline. But no matter how far he traveled, no matter how many hopeful eyes he met, the one he sought remained out of reach, a flicker of light beyond the horizon. And still, the golden anklet pulsed with quiet warmth, a promise that the girl with ashes on her skin was out there, waiting for the moment to return. When the prince finally arrived at Ash's village, a sense of anticipation filled the air, though the villagers themselves seemed quieter than before. Word had spread of his search, and eyes watched with curiosity and hope. But Ash's stepmother grew frantic at the news. She sensed the danger the prince's visit posed to her carefully maintained control. Determined to keep Ash hidden, the stepmother locked the girl away in a small dark room behind the house. "No one must see her," she hissed. "She is nothing but ashes and rags." Outside, she ordered her 2 daughters to present themselves to the prince, each eager to claim the prize that was clearly beyond their reach. The prince stood in the village square, holding the golden anklet in his hand. One by one the stepsisters approached with false smiles, slipping the delicate anklet around their ankles. But with each attempt the anklet resisted. It slipped off like water, refusing to bind to their skin. The prince's heart tightened with growing frustration. Disappointment flickered in the prince's eyes as he prepared to leave the village, fearing his search might be in vain once more. The crowd murmured uneasily, sensing the sudden shift in his mood. Then from behind the house, a soft, haunting melody drifted through the air, the very same song Ash had sung the night of the festival. It was a voice both fragile and strong, carrying the weight of longing and hope. The prince stopped. The song was unmistakable. Following the music, he stepped quietly toward the back of the village, where the air grew cooler and the shadows deeper. There, behind the wooden walls, he heard the voice again, clearer, more certain, singing the riddle he had heard at the festival. "I am the one the fire remembered." The prince's heart surged. He called out softly, "Show yourself." From the doorway appeared Ash, her skin still dusted with faint ashes, but her eyes shining with a quiet fire. She wore simple clothes, torn and faded, yet the golden anklet fit snugly on her ankle as if it had waited only for her. The prince looked at her in awe, the mystery unfolding before him like a dream. Ash's stepmother and stepsisters stood frozen, their schemes unraveling in an instant. The prince knelt, taking Ash's hand gently. "You are the one I have been searching for," he said with reverence. "Not for your dress or your beauty, but for your spirit that shines brighter than gold." Ash's eyes met his, a mixture of relief and hope glowing within them. The village seemed to hold its breath, witnessing the moment where truth and destiny intertwined, where a girl who had been hidden away by cruelty was finally seen and chosen for who she truly was. The prince's footsteps echoed softly in the dimly lit storage room where Ash had been hidden away among dusty sacks of grain and forgotten tools. The air was heavy with neglect, but a strange warmth pulsed as he entered. The golden anklet in his hand began to glow, faintly at first, then brighter, like a beacon in the shadows. He knelt down and reached out gently, slipping the anklet onto Ash's ankle. Instantly, the room was flooded with radiant light, golden and warm, spilling from her like the first rays of dawn. The shadows that had clung to the corners scattered as if chased away by the firelight within her. Ash looked up, her eyes wide with wonder and something deeper, recognition. The magic was not just in the anklet or the golden garments, but in her very soul. She was the fire remembered, the light the world had tried to snuff out but never could. Her stepmother burst into the room, panic etched across her face. "Please," she begged, tears streaming down her cheeks, "forgive me. I was wrong to treat you this way. I see now you are worthy of all the gold in the world." But Ash's eyes were steady, strong. She spoke not with bitterness but with calm resolve. "You cannot give what I never needed from you." The prince rose and turned to Ash. You have the choice now, he said softly, to come with me to live as a princess, embraced by the world, or to stay here where your roots are. Ash paused, feeling the warmth of the light around her, feeling the weight of her past and the promise of the future. Then she spoke with quiet certainty, "Let me walk in gold on my own terms." The prince nodded, respect shining in his eyes. "Then I will wait until you are ready." Ash smiled for the first time in a long while, not the smile of a girl hiding in ashes, but the radiant smile of a woman reclaiming her story. The firelight was hers and she would decide how and when to let it shine. The stepmother, humbled and changed, bowed her head in silence, the lesson of the fire's light burning clear. Outside, the village stirred as dawn broke, the promise of a new day carrying the hope of gold that did not simply adorn but transformed. Ash's journey was not just about a crown or a castle, it was about reclaiming her own light and sharing it with those who had been hidden in shadows. When she finally chose to walk in gold on her own terms, it marked the beginning of a new chapter, not only for herself but for every girl who had ever felt unseen. The prince, true to his word, waited patiently for Ash to be ready. In time, Ash accepted his hand, not as a surrender but as a partnership between equals. She became queen not just by marriage but by spirit, a queen who ruled with kindness, wisdom, and an unbreakable will. From the moment she stepped into the palace, Ash carried the firelight within her, lighting every dark corner with hope. She understood what it meant to be forgotten, to be hidden away, and she made it her mission to change that. With the prince's support, Ash founded schools in villages where children had never learned to read, places where they could dream beyond the limits set by poverty or cruelty. She built shelters where girls who had nowhere to go could find safety and warmth, where they could laugh and grow without fear. Her voice, once silenced by ashes and rags, became a beacon that reached far beyond the palace walls. Ash spoke of strength found in kindness, of beauty rooted in courage, and of the gold that shines brightest when shared with others. Her story spread across the land, inspiring mothers and daughters alike to believe in their worth, no matter their past or how others tried to dim their light. Meanwhile, Ash's stepmother faced the consequences of her cruelty. The village elders, moved by Ash's transformation and the prince's judgment, decided to exile the stepmother from the village. She was left to wander, a shadow of her former self, a reminder of the cost of jealousy and harshness. Though she begged for forgiveness, the damage had been done. The warmth of Ash's fire could not be erased. The mysterious golden stranger who had gifted Ash with the firelight was never seen again. Some whispered that she was a spirit of the moon, watching silently from afar, waiting for the next soul who needed to be remembered. Others believed she was the spirit of Ash's mother, watching over her daughter's journey from the stars. On the night of every harvest festival, long after Ash's story had woven itself into legend, golden embers still flickered in the gentle wind. Children gathered beneath the moonlight, their eyes wide with wonder as they whispered the tale of the girl who had once been covered in ashes but now walked proudly in gold. They spoke of her kindness, her courage, and the magic that had transformed her, a magic born from enduring hardship and choosing oneself above all else. And in those whispers the firelight lived on, a reminder that even in the darkest moments gold can be found, not just in riches or royal robes, but in the strength to rise, to forgive, and to shine.